I'll start the meeting off with
Nominate Director DeBoon.
Recording in progress.
Second.
then I'll quickly go through two more calls for nomination then. Second call, third call, hearing none. Your chair for the year is Director DeBoon. Pass it over to you, Chair.
I thought we'd have an election, me against nobody.
Speech. Yeah, 2 minutes.
Okay, thanks, everyone. Appreciate that. Yeah, people's whose traditional land we are meeting today. I don't have the script in front of me, sorry, but we acknowledge and respect the Indigenous peoples within whose traditional lands we are meeting today. So I would like the motion to adopt the agenda as circulated. Any changes?
Just so moved.
Sure.
There's a report mentioned for the concession. I'll just verbally.
Okay, yeah, it is on the agenda.
Yeah, I'll just talk about
We do it verbally, that's fine. Seconded by Director Vandenberg, all in favor?
No.
Oh, wait a minute.
So if I may, through the chair, first of all, there is a item 10.2, which is really a report from the library meeting. And I know as we've discussed, there is no section in our agenda that stands where we can put in such, and that's what this is meant to be, is a director's report. So I'm wondering if the group is amenable to recommending standing for direction reports. That would be to report relevant to what happens in Creston Valley. So my suggestion is a discussion around adding that section to a standing agenda.
Director Jackman.
Yeah, in fairness, so direction to staff, and you would have to look at that, I think, for our standard templates.
Director's report.
Yeah, direction to staff to add that standing item. I think that's quite fair request, and then that would have to take that dimension, sure, to see how that.
Yeah, Stu, you've got your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, through the chair, I was just going to mention that it's fine. I think that Director Jackman's suggestion is appropriate, but I would also the board agenda. So we just got to make sure we coordinate that.
But further to that, if I may, if it's posted within the minutes of Crescent Valley Services, it then technically reaches the board. So does it need to then be posted secondly for a second time for the board under director's reports? I just want clarity.
Yeah, through the chair, that's what I would recommend is that if you have a director's report, forward it on to Ange, and we can handle that with the agenda. We can just make sure that Robin's forwarding the material to Ange to include, because just the minutes go on the board agenda, not any reports by default. So we'd have to make sure the material is included as well.
Okay, understood. Thank you for that. Secondly, if I may, through the chair.
Yes.
In December, we had a number of direction to staff, particularly on budget items that were supposed to be redirected. To reduce by 10%. Item 8.1, dangerous dogs, was scale of service reduction and related budget. And 8.2 in December was Creston Museum, a move to discuss in January further budget discussion. None of those items made it to the agenda today. I'm not sure what we're going to do about it, but staff needs to have direction from us, and these presented does not necessarily make the budget because we have not given direction. The big one that we have?
Yeah.
No, we do not want to address it there. Okay. No, sorry. Thanks for the thought though. Not a special budget meeting. These items that I referred to were We're asked to roll forward to January. The special budget meeting, I believe, is the large one that we have here. Is that the special budget meeting or is there another special budget meeting?
The Friday of the work.
Oh, Friday of the board. I
No,
don't want to be
we-
discussing that at.
We usually have one here.
On schedule, but
No, we don't.
So,
We need to.
yeah, go ahead.
So, through the chair, we did get direction on the dangerous dogs, but revision of the material for a potential public process, and we are working through that. Obviously, with the short turnaround with the holidays, difficult to get on this agenda. I believe Joe can speak to the museum piece. I think that budget is ready, and perhaps we'd have a delegation in February for that.
Yeah, through the chair, the 5-year budget based upon that, based upon their presentation, Director Vandenberg from. Sorry, was Stu's comment. It was, there definitely have been some things, maybe missed. Of the committee can either put it together, just get it into a format for you to be able to review it right now.
If I may.
Yeah.
My opinion is that we got this agenda yesterday, less than 24 hours ago. And there's a number of things, there's a lot of things on it, and not having these things carry over, we can't prepare for. So these 3 items that I have mentioned, perhaps they're best served being in February, so that we know that we're going to further discuss that budget for the purpose of advising staff how we want to go on the budget. Pinching it in today, we won't have time, and I certainly, my head is not wrapped around it because I'm trying to figure out where we need to be with short notice on this particular agenda. So that would be a good solution, is to advance those items in December to February.
We need a motion on that.
Well, yeah, I would move that the 3 items that were identified in the minutes for the December meeting to be discussed today be referred to the February agenda. That said, I'm still gonna ask about dangerous dog, because that's how I was gonna address the one lapse. To, the agenda, that's 8.1, 8.8.
Sure, it's carried. Separate from this, because we could perhaps do all this in February at that meeting. Perhaps we can. But
I would suggest at that point in time, and that would be scheduled separate. So kind of
but pursuant to the February meeting or prior to the February.
yeah, so that to me would be you as chair, you discuss that with Jeff, whether that fits and what time you would want to start it. I would almost rather this time have it after the Creston Valley Services, because we have made a determination for a couple of controversial. I wouldn't want a public presentation where we say, hey, here's our proposed for new taxation for the valley, but hang on in an hour, we might change. External grants.
And I guess the other thing that we should perhaps consider. What's a calendar conflict, but if we know that far in advance, what would it be for next year? By the way, that's something Let's give us more time.
If I may opt in, there is some strategic, good common sense to that, but then remind a meeting in January, 2 weeks later, we're having a meeting in February. So that's the only trickiness of that.
I guess we'd have to perhaps have an oversight in December for that, because I think perhaps we should have done more to prepare for this in December. I know that's difficult because of to next December as to what we need to do. So I think we could leave it for that. Motion to adopt the agenda then.
To move adopted as presented.
Okay. Seconded. Right. Great. Bradford, all in favor? The minutes of December. Unless there are changes.
Just a question,
Yep.
It does read, the minutes have been revised. And I just want clarity, I went through the minutes, I didn't notice anything that was revised per se. What does revised mean?
It was your item on the transit, on the bike carriers. on the bus. Yeah, it was
thank you.
revised. Yeah.
Receive as revised then. Yeah, that's.
Carried.
It's just a receipt anyway. So the staff report on the Real Estate Foundation funding Goat River. Oh, I see Paris is there. Go ahead, Paris, you're on then.
Good morning. Thank you. And thank you through the chair. I also have with me Teresa Fresco, who's from the Fraser Basin Council. So this is, if there's an opportunity, if there's time for her to introduce herself, just as part of the standing item on the watershed security or the Goat River watershed water sustainability planning. But I'll just speak first to the Real Estate Foundation and our request for direction to apply for funding to continue phase 3 and phase 4 of this work. The request so this went to board last in December, and there was a request from directors at that time to provide a bit more information about the proposed budget that is in the report. And so we have provided additional detail in the attachment 3. And really to say the additional information is to highlight that we are applying for funds at this time in anticipation of wanting to proceed with phase 3 and phase 4, but that also acknowledging that phase 3 and phase 4 aren't yet clarified. And so we don't have clarity on how to proceed, though we generally have some buckets of work that we know we need to do, specifically the aquifer isotopic modeling to better understand the relationship of the groundwater to surface water in the watershed, and then also some additional engagement work. We also wanted to highlight the first bucket around consultant work, that is really a placeholder at this time to either offset funding for offset staff time or the taxation or LGCAP funding for staff time from the RDCK if it's done internally, or it would be to hire consultants. But and so what we'd like to propose is that in April, if in April of this year, that we do a planning session with the electeds and better think through the details of phase 3 and work through some of the questions around this budget if there's interest to proceed with this application.
Yes, my first question, Paris, is then do we have an accurate total request here?
Thank you through the chair. Sorry, could you say that again, please? The total request of funding, is that the question?
Yeah, because we have it all listed here, but what you're saying right now makes me wonder, is the request that we have here on the agenda accurately the total that we are requesting still?
Thank you. Yes, through the chair. Yes, it is going to be the amount that we request. we know that, so 200,000 is a high amount for the real estate foundation to consider. They have a threshold of under 50 and over 50,000. And so we imagine, or I imagine that putting in this request, likely they would not fund the total amount that we're requesting. So I imagine that we might be more successful in the 100 or 150 range. So if the committee felt more comfortable, we could reduce that amount, but our numbers at this time do fit what we think is the appropriate cost for the work that needs to be done. So the 2,000 is an appropriate budget.
Okay, thank you. Questions?
Yeah, thanks through the chair. And I didn't pull up all your reports that are attached, but in the attachments, there's also an indication of another 100,000, I believe, available for through the ag funding sources, agriculture improvement, or whatever that fund is, as well as, of course, we have a community application that I believe is confirmed now. So we have 2 other funding sources. Is that correct? Through the Paris, they're confirmed.
Thank you. Through the chair, yes, we received 100,000 that's specific to producer engagement. And so that's very targeted towards working with producers. And again, the Real Estate Foundation, the hope is to be more general and provide additional work more broadly in terms of engagement. And the C2C funding, we received 20,000 of that. And again, that's very specific to leadership. So to support discussions between Yakinuki Council and RDCK elected officials.
Go further.
Subsequent, yeah.
Yeah, so, Real Estate Foundation has funded some pretty significant projects in the past. Kootenay Lake Partnership funding was significant for more than 1 year. We went to them for a few intakes. So I'm fine asking for the larger amount, recognizing that a lot of the entities who would carry out this work is still to be determined as identified in the report. And it will just simply have to adjust and maybe see how the other funds can be utilized, depending what Real Estate Foundation is willing to provide. Also, the amount that we would actually require for the producer engagement, we'll begin to learn how that might play out this afternoon, because we have one of our first workshops or focus group sessions with producers this afternoon. I'm comfortable with the way it's laid out right now. I'm optimistic, regardless of what amount of funding we get, we may be able to recoup some of our in-house costs for this process, in which case we may be able then to do a financial plan amendment through the year and return some of the CAREC funding, which was granted through the board as a whole, as 100, back to that funding pool to be used for other projects. So I'm okay with this ask. So maybe one last question is, if the amount is on the high side, would we expect Real Estate Foundation to come back and ask for an amended amount? Is that normal to be iterative, or would they just come back and say, you get this through the Paris?
Thank you. Through the chair, yes, there's a two-phase process with the Real Estate Foundation. It's been a while since I've applied for them, but and received funding for them for this work. But my understanding is that phase 1 is essentially a concept approval, and so at that time they would ask us to define the budget and say we want to support. What I imagine is that, and what I recall is that we want to support this work. We can't support it to this amount. Would you please redevelop the budget to something that's more acceptable to our amounts?
Can I make one more point then? Because we kind of did some back and forth, as I recall, with the Kootenay Lake Partnership stuff. And there's a possibility, if we do the back and forth, that the Real Estate Foundation will want us to nail down who the money's going to, because they have their own mandates. We have had conversations about that in the past, at which time I hope it would come back to us to see if the options as to who receives this funding and what amounts are narrowed. We would get to see that, because I'm always looking for the best value for the big picture. And separate, after other people speak to this recommendation, I'd like us to offer freedom of the floor, if we can, to Teresa Fresco, because if it's appropriate, I'd like to ask her directly a question about something that came to mind from the economic side.
Okay, you made the motion for freedom of the floor, Secretary.
Yeah, we don't have any other motion on the floor. Sure, it's freedom of the floor.
Okay.
If appropriate. Can I ask that question then?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, then through the chair, and welcome Teresa, you haven't had a chance to introduce yourself, which I'm sure you do as part of it, if you're able to answer this question. Not too many years ago, we had a really good report from a woman, I believe she was based in Prince George, and I think she was working through the Fraser Basin Council. It was on cattle. And it was really an excellent drill down of the economics of cattle in northern BC, you know, supply of feed is different there, you know, what you don't hear, they can have 4 cuts of alfalfa a year, not so much maybe Prince George or Fort St. John. Is that accurate? Was the Fraser Basin Council involved in producing detailed economic analysis of an ag sector over the last few years?
Thanks so much for the question. I am not aware of that report, but I can look into it. Do you recall the name of the presenter?
No, I think I can find it. I just, between yesterday, different meetings, conversations this week, I haven't had time to dig. And if I do find it, I'll send it through to Paris. It was an excellent economic analysis. And that's kind of the template I hope we would follow for the impact of water on the agricultural yield for this valley. Failing that, of course, Quantum College, I think, is, in my mind, one of the experts that could do it. But Fraser Basin Council may have done this just a few years ago.
Yeah, I'll definitely look into it if you can get the name of the presenter. It's not uncommon for Fraser Basin Council to work with numerous experts based in the various regions in which we work. So I can look further into it if that was something that we worked on.
Thanks.
Director Vandenberg.
Yes, thank you. I'm partially in agreement, almost 3/4 in agreement with my colleague. And that's more to do along the lines of what is intended or what has been proposed for the financial or the fiscal framework. Understanding that we don't know where this is going, but we do need to have some seed money, that sort of thing. That's all reasonable. We've had discussion around this at a workshop. And my concern at this point, and it was brought up in the workshop, that what we don't know is who our funding or our funding options are. It's just, it seems to be that this is who we're going to go to because we have in the past. I think that it is incumbent upon us to recognize what our funding options are before we commit to one entity. Is the kind of the direction I'm going here. I kind of would like to. I mean, we know we're going to be, after today, there's going to be a break in action for some period of time. What came up in the importance of council to council, leadership to leadership meetings, which has not occurred, which should have already occurred, but hasn't. I think that's an important piece that needs to set the tone for everything going forward, which I still believe is that needs to be done first before we start talking about what direction we're going to go, and particularly narrow in on the funding streams that are available. I would like to suggest a motion that we provide, that staff provide funding and funder options that align with 4.2 on the December 11th, 2025 board report, which is attachment in here, and report it back to Creston Valley Services Committee. That would be my motion.
We have a seconder for that.
Can you phrase that again?
Right, so one of the reports that's attached here is the board report we got in December, which is section 4.2. It identified potentially. So what I'm asking for is, can we, with this time between now and springtime, can we look at funding and funder options? Different than Real Estate Foundation of BC, because we're just automatically going to them. And I'm concerned with portions of their mandates. And I want to see what other funding opportunities we have. We can take that structure, that fiscal structure, that budget structure that's prepared by staff. We can break that up, as you had mentioned in the workshop. But if we proceed in this fashion, we lose that opportunity.
So I will second it so that discussion can occur, and then I have a question for Paris maybe. But yeah, I'll second the motion is that we, in between now and whether we hear, what funding may be available through Real Estate Foundation,
And
there may be further investigation for other funding sources. So I think that's valid. We should do that anyway. I would second that.
If
Can I
we
talk
pass
a
that
little?
motion, we delay some of this by a month because it would have to come back to our February meeting.
But if I could speak more to it, I don't think that would prevent us from making the application for 200K to the Fraser Bay Spark to the Real Estate Foundation right now. It's just a natural concurrent process that we would try to refine our internal costs, expectations, budget projections. There's lots of work that can be done in the next few months before we sit down with Yakanuki. For example, finding out who would be the best source of economic advice, economic analysis. And we may want to advance that work by applying for a smaller grant from a different outfit, remove that from this piece of it. So I think it's a natural process in the next 3 months to look for piecing this together with the best entity. That's fine. And that doesn't preclude us from asking for all the money from Real Estate Foundation. Could take them 2 months to get back to us.
Guess I'm looking for a staff response then on, is this doable and what the impact would be? Go ahead.
Thank you through the chair. From what I'm understanding is that there's interest to potentially proceed with the application for the Real Estate Foundation, see what the response is, but at the same time also pursue some research around other funding opportunities and specifically see if some of those line items within the budget as it's proposed could be funded through other sources as well, just to diversify. Have I understood correctly?
Yes, that's correct.
And perhaps could I provide a response, Chair?
Yes.
So yes, that would work well from my perspective. The deadline for the Real Estate Foundation application is February 5th. And during the time that I'm away, Camille can do the research and present to CVSE on different funding options that are discovered. I would just say that we have also done quite a bit of research already, but we can present that as part of our update, perhaps at the February meeting, of where funders are. And that is also the reason why we've pursued the Investment Agriculture Foundation and also FCM, trying to diversify and trying to really reach into all the pockets that are relevant to this work. The one funder that has come up at this table that we haven't pursued is ESTI, and that's the Economic Southern Interior, or the trust. Thank you, ETSI. And we were given the feedback that it wasn't sufficient. So we did meet with staff and we were given the feedback that it wasn't sufficiently focused on economic development. And so, which is unfortunate, but we can pursue them again and continue to have that conversation. And we can bring that list to you of all the funders as well.
Okay. Go ahead, Amy. Go ahead, Amy.
Yeah, good morning. Sorry. I think Paris just answered the question. I just wanted to be cognizant of staff time. I had understood that they had already reviewed various funders to assess that. And Paris just indicated this. So I was just I wanted to know, A, do we have staff availability to do this? And B, was this not already completed? Because I do recall her indicating this before. So just wanting to make sure we're not duplicating a step or being inefficient with staff time. Not to say it's not a valid question. I just think that staff had already done that. So that was what I was checking in on.
Thank you. Through the chair. Yes, we've done it informally. So as I mentioned, it's been part of our work, and I don't think it would be, if it's of interest to CVSE, we can prepare a list and present that as a slide or as an attachment to the agenda, just as reference, so that CVSE has that as well. I don't see that taking a lot of time, but yes, so both things are true, that we have done the work and we are able to do it.
Richard Tierney.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think it's just a logical motion, given that Real Estate Foundation said generally are around $50,000. So we wouldn't want to be set back a couple months if we have to start looking for funders when they are not able to fund us full amount. It makes sense to look and see who else has funds available.
I guess my only concern, and I don't think it's a big concern, is that our desired scheduling for things like the C2C meeting that we really want to have, I just wouldn't want that to kind of fall out of the queue, so that that stays on the schedule that we desire, and hopefully we'll have it when we want it. I wouldn't think this would affect that, but I just want to know if it would or not.
Thank you. Yes, through the chair. So what I've heard clearly from electeds is that it's the C2C meeting, the leadership to leadership meeting is of high priority and is overdue from our perspective. And so the see that as a high priority, and that also that having confidence that that will help inform next steps. That's partly why we wanted to bring Teresa here today, is to introduce you so that we could start to begin that work with the Fraser Basin Council of readiness, of preparing ourselves, and so that would be the priority for May, and we can do a workshop, an informal workshop, as CVSC with staff to discuss work plans, but I guess what I'm trying to say is that the next big item on the agenda is really to have those meetings and to further the relationship. And we don't see any essential work happening before that. We can do preparatory work, but that would all be to happen after we have clarity around how we're working together, or at least further understanding of how we're working together.
Good. Thank you for that. So we have a recommendation there, it's written on the agenda, but the way we've discussed it, I think we have to adapt that recommendation. And
Well, I have a specific motion on the table.
Yeah, sure. I think we can vote on Director Vandenberg's recommendation and then go ahead with the staff recommendation as well as written, because they parallel exercises.
Sure. So we'll vote on your recommendation first. All in favor? That motion is carried. And secondly, that we just simply add that to the recommendation that is on the agenda, correct?
No, there'd be separate, Chair.
Yeah,
That's
separate,
carried,
but-
and now I would like to move the recommendation as presented in the agenda to make the application of real estate foundation in support of phases 3, 4.
I'll second it, but I do wish to comment. I just wanted to be clear to staff. I don't want to start wordsmithing this motion, but as it reads now, it authorizes staff to apply to the Real Estate Foundation of BC grant to support phases 3 and 4. It's not necessarily to support all of 3 and 4. It could be all of it, could be portions, that sort of thing. I just want that clear, that just as it's written says it's supporting all of it. And that's not what we discussed. That's not the intent of where we're trying to go.
Thank you.
Sounds like you have the clarity of, is that correct?
Noted. Yes, thank you through the chair.
All in favor of that? That is carried. And we will proceed then. The next item, which is new business 10.1, Creston Valley Public Library. Oh, go ahead, Paris.
My apologies. I wonder if there is an opportunity for Teresa to introduce herself.
Yes, please.
That may happen. Thank you very much. And she has, and we requested just a short introduction, 2 to 3 minutes. She has prepared some slides as well, but at the discretion of the chair, if those are appropriate at this time.
Yes, absolutely. Let's do that.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Paris. Thanks, Mr. Chair. Really appreciate the invitation and the opportunity to join you all this morning. So, Kiskukit, Hadi, Kumusta? I'm just going to share my slides just for a visual and just to provide a bit of background on myself. as well as the Fraser Basin Council, for those that may not be familiar with FBC. So a little bit about myself. I'm the Director of Indigenous Partnerships and Initiatives with Fraser Basin Council. Joining you today from my home office in the Land of Plenty, also known as Courtney on Vancouver Island in the traditional unceded territory of the Comox First Nation. And to provide a bit of information about my background, by way of cultural background, I am Nadotan. I'm the member of the Lake Babine Nation. On my mother's side, an immigrant settler from the Visayas region of the Philippines on my father's. Educational background is in the area of community and regional planning, as well as collaborative watershed planning. I've got a master's from UBC and a bachelor's from the University of the Fraser Valley. And I've been with Fraser Basin Council since 2012. So going on 14 years this fall. For those not familiar with the Fraser Basin Council, we're a nonprofit, non-government organization, and we're really aimed at bringing people together to advance sustainability solutions and practices in BC. A nod to our beginnings at our inception in 1997, where we primarily focused on the Fraser River Basin. But in the last decade, our board of directors has recognized the interconnectedness of our work throughout various regions of BC, and so adopting that BC-wide mandate. We've often served as a trusted facilitator and convener for a broad diversity of projects and programs, with an emphasis on Indigenous and non-Indigenous relations, climate change, community resilience, and watershed health. We have a very sizable board of directors. We have 38 board of directors, and I did want to acknowledge our director, Wendy Booth, who's been on our board for a number of years, who serves on our governance and watershed committee. Just a quick overview and sampling of aligning areas of work, just to give you a flavor for the work that we do, especially in collaborative watershed governance and government to government engagement and dialogue. So these are a series of projects that I'm leading or together with my colleagues. So one example is working with Metro Vancouver and the 10 Nations in Metro Vancouver on their liquid waste management plan implementation. That's work that I've been doing with my colleagues over the last year. I am the lead facilitator for the Kootenay Lake and Cranbrook Forest Landscape Planning government to government tables. It's how I've come to know Isaac Decker from Yakanuki. For land use planning, we've also done some work with the Local Government Management Association and the First Nation Public Service Secretariat, where we're serving as the facilitator and project lead for a series of regional workshops. And we've been doing that work for a few years now. And I also wanted to acknowledge the collaborative watershed roundtables, where we serve as a key facilitator, coordinator, and secretariat support. The Nechako Watershed Roundtable, the Shuswap Watershed Council, and I also wanted to acknowledge our previous work leading the Nicola Watershed Partnership. And I don't know if folks are aware, but there is a water sustainability planning process that is now underway in the Nicola in a government to government format. So I'll just wanted to give a quick overview, and so I'll leave it there and pause for any questions, but just wanted to thank everyone for the time and the invitation this morning.
Any questions?
Already asked mine.
Yeah. Well, thank you for presenting that to us, Teresa. Look forward to more from you.
So thank you so much for the consideration for this work.
Right, we will then move on to Sarah, the library budget presentation.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, that's super. So normally, as we've organized things, Kathy would be the person doing the presentation, but she is out of the country at the moment. So I'm going to do my best with her work. But obviously, running the library, I know a lot about it. So it's just Robin, do you think you could put up the slides for So basically, Kathy has taken the information that we shared with you verbally last meeting, and she's put it into some slides with you. I noticed she included a pie chart and the written notes for our budget lines that you can see. Do you all have it in front of you?
I think we have it on e-scribe. Roger, yeah, so we have it, Sarah.
Yeah, super. So I don't need to read all the slides. I think that's probably not necessary, but we just wanted to highlight that like most public libraries in the province, most of our funding, 78%, comes from local government, and the stagnation, the ongoing stagnation of provincial funding has necessitated the continued closure one day per week to balance our budget. I think I mentioned before that Cranbrook also has had to cut back hours, and this year I think we're probably going to see many other public libraries in the same boat, particularly small rural ones, some even smaller than ours. If you can just move on to the next slide. So this is the budget that that we submitted last meeting with the written notes. Are there any questions arising from it now that you've had more time to have a look?
I will reserve till the end of the.
Okay, we'll just wait till the end of the presentation, I think, Sarah.
Sure. So we included the cost of having Fridays open and the cost if they are closed, with the big figure being staffing for the library is our greatest expense. It lists where we get all our other funds. One thing I did want to highlight is we have applied for a grant for $59,875 from the Columbia Basin Trust for accessibility improvements. And I've just been waiting on RDCK staff if they can give a support reply in principle is what the Columbia Basin Trust is looking for. I understand that they might want an architect to look at the plans for the doors, which are just changing buttons mostly and updating the mechanics of the doors because they're quite old. The work person that came in was a little bit surprised at how old the mechanisms were. And the ramp at our back garden, which we've talked to a local worker. We try to use local labor as much as possible because it's really important to us that we support our local economy with our funding dollars. So another piece I wanted to highlight is that our board is going to be launching a fundraising campaign. I know that Kathy, our board chair, has met with some of you on the committee already about that. But you can see that there are a lot of increases that are out of control, particularly around digital collections. So that's our e-books, our e-magazines, our e-audiobooks, which continues to go up in use. And subscriptions usually increase from 7 to 12% every year. And unlike back in the day when you could buy the material in a disc and that was your software to own, once you stop a subscription you lose material, or if you cancel a subscription oftentimes you get charged a premium when you have to restart it. So it's a bit frustrating to be stuck in that trap. So that's the notes on the budget. Can we move on to the next, past the next slide, Robin? Those are the notes that I just went over. Yeah. And I mentioned that at the beginning, so we can move on to the next one. There's the pie chart. You can see visually where we get our funding. Internal income, libraries, according to the Library Act, are not allowed to charge for essential services. So we try to keep that as much of a minimum. Again, the library tries to be very barrier free so that people can use our services for free. That's what libraries are all about. So when we look at internal income, that's mostly our printing services, some book replacement for damaged materials, but the printing services cover the cost of the printing itself. We're not turning a profit there. So Kathy put together some strategic alignment. We're working towards stable and predictable funding, obviously through our work and relationship with you and our efforts province-wide to advocate with our provincial government. We're trying to establish long-term service sustainability. Nobody wants to see more cuts. Nobody who works at the library and people in the community. I think I mentioned in our last meeting that despite cutting 15% of our hours by closing on Fridays, our traffic has only dipped about 7%. So we're actually doing more on the days that we are open. So there is still demand from the community for our service. It just makes it a little busier and more stressful for staff. And we want to make sure that we're reliable in the delivery of our services. When things change all the time, particularly in our community, which has a lot of seniors, it can be disorienting for people. So we want to be as stable as possible. Can we move on to the next slide? I just went over that one, Robin, sorry. Next one, thanks. So I just wanted to highlight some of the really incredible work we do, just because I haven't seen any of you pop in lately. I know Gary visited us in the summer and he got to see our summer reading club presentations. Sorry, Director Jackman. But I just wanted to point out some of the really cool stuff we do. So we still have a story time available for 0 to 5-year-olds on Wednesdays. We've had a bit of a baby boom in town, so there's a really good turnout for that. And in the summer, when Family Place closes and there isn't much for parents and the little ones, we run an open playtime so that they still have a place to meet that is air conditioned and they can connect with other community members. And it creates that sort of parental support in the community. Our adult programmer visits Swan Valley and Crestview monthly, does deliveries to residents at Crestview, and does readings at Swan Valley. And that's a really special relationship that we feel is important. We sign up a lot of people for our accessible services through that relationship as well. Our one-to-one computer and device skills support. This is mostly for seniors and high demand. I think I mentioned before that our tech help sessions that our IT coordinator does have gone up 22% over last year, even though we are down one day. So there's a lot of need for that sort of no cost support, especially as things are more and more digitally. And you can read a lot of the other stuff, but I also wanted to highlight Reading Buddies because I think it's a really special program. We often have more teens applying to mentor and read with little kids to help them grow their confidence in reading than we actually have spaces for. The hours that teens put in count for volunteer hours, and they love it. They love giving back to the community. They love working with kids. I'm going to invite you to just pop by the library during a session, because it's a really alive place with teens feeling like they're really giving back to the community. They're really helping kids out, and the kids just beam. They are so excited that teens are paying attention to them, and it's just really cool to see. We can move on. So what we're asking is essentially if you, with Fridays being closed, again, we're going to be launching a fundraising campaign to try to open. But we're just asking for approval of the budget at what the RDCK already has in their 5-year financial plan. And that would maintain our current service with Fridays close. But perhaps there's room here for discussion about ways to enable temporary funding. I know that Director Jackman has talked about the reserve contribution, and that's what we did last year as well. And the advocacy with the province is ongoing. So that's the end of the presentation. Thank you very much for your time. I know that you've heard a lot about the library over the years that I've been presenting with you and sharing time with you. If you have any questions, please let me know.
Director Vandenberg.
So just for clarity, we're not going to be deliberating on the budget today, correct? We would have to move that to the February agenda for final decision. Okay. So thank you, Sarah, for your presentation. I would like to share with the group, I've done a little bit of research and analysis myself, and I've noticed or come to the conclusion that Creston and Castlegar are very similar. They both have leases with RDCK. Castlegar facility is slightly larger in total square feet than Creston. They have a basement that has meeting rooms and that sort of thing. Population difference between Castlegar and Creston is about 12% larger for Castlegar, for the Castlegar and surrounding areas. I had the opportunity to take a look at the website comparisons, and it's limited when you're trying to compare the level of services offered between Castlegar and Creston. But at the end, they're very similar, and I thought that they ought to be. Both libraries are members of the Association of BC Public Library Directors, and probably other organizations where they share best practices, that sort of thing. So I wouldn't expect that the level of the service would be a lot different. The key differences that I note, though, will note is Castlegar operates at 2,600 hours per year. They're open 6 days a week with 2 late openings during the week. Creston operates at currently, with open at 4 days a week, at 1,664 hours per year. The Fridays closed scenario. When you do a comparison between the budgets with Castlegar and Creston, you can boil based on the hours that are available and open. What comes to light is the Castlegar operating cost per hour is $281 based on them being open at $2,600 hours a year. Creston, with the Fridays closed currently, if you do a comparison, is operating at $476 an hour based on 1,664 hours a year. So to me, I'm interested in understanding the key differences in terms of the operating costs and other services from Castlegar to Creston. Why is there such a disparity? And so that will influence our further conversation around debating on the budget. I try to look at it from an apples to apples point of view, but an operating cost of 281 open 6 days a week versus 476 open 4 days a week jumps out at you. And so I think the reasonable question is to ask, what are those factors that are influencing that cost of service to our taxpayers in our community? So that's kind of where I'm leading to on this. And that's something that you can't answer right now. It'd be totally unfair. And but it would be something that I would like to know when considering the budget for the library in our next gathering.
Right now? Is that okay?
You were sort of interrupted there. You want to repeat that, Sarah?
I can respond to that right now.
Yeah,
If
you
that's
wouldn't
okay.
mind.
Yeah. So, because Director Vandenberg brought this up briefly at our last January meeting, and I responded to it then. I had mentioned that the Castlegar Library had a new director, and I was actually mentoring them with some of the challenges that they face there. But I also, the Castlegar director is a colleague of mine, and I've had an opportunity to chat with her recently. And the difference is staffing cost. That's what the difference is. So Castlegar doesn't have an IT person. They don't have a person to run their computer systems. They don't have as many computer systems. They don't have tech programs at all. So that is a difficulty for them, a challenge. They also don't have anyone doing adult programming. So they don't have an adult programmer like we do. So it's 2 staff people that are the difference. And then the other piece of that is that they're actually entering into bargaining. So their previous collective agreement ended last year, I think, or it's possibly the end of 2024. And they're going to be moving into bargaining, which is going to dramatically change their wage structure. It can be difficult when you're comparing communities. I remember actually Director Tierney, it was one of your colleagues many years ago who scolded me once because I compared our service to Castlegar. But they're basically trying to move their service more towards our model, which is actually sustainable for the people that run the service and the patrons that use the service.
Director Jackman.
Yeah, some observations around, not speculation around what Director Vandenberg has presented as a comparison. I use a little different analogy. If I was starting a business in Castlegar, say it was a bicycle shop, I'd have customers from Trail, Castlegar, and Nelson due to the proximity and ease of access to service. And it's different than being in Creston, which is relatively isolated. Not as many people might jump from Creston to Cranbrook, say, or down to the States even to get A, B, or C in terms of product or service. So we look at the library services and the conversation's been floating around about sort of the social service aspect to sustain what we otherwise could just lose in this community. If you're in Castlegar, you might actually be in China Creek or halfway to Trail. You may get certain services you need. Computer services, support for seniors, some youth activities. You might just migrate to Trail if you live, Richelieu or Points East. You may migrate to Nelson. There's alternatives. We're not apples and apples. Castlegar is clustered above more than 4 times our population within 20-30 minutes drive. It's a different cluster. We are a kind of isolated cluster. So my thoughts are on a few fronts. We can wait and see if there's further analysis that makes sense in terms of comparison apples to apples. You can wait and see how things turn out, as indicated with the negotiations for contracts and wages, because those things are, they're cyclical. You may find that today's picture isn't very representative in a year. We can stick with the request for the slower amount and wait and see if other funding comes out of the community and other various sources to reopen, even if it's a part day or shift the service hours. If we do that, we're still looking at a fairly large budget increase because of the fact that we yanked our contribution to capital reserve So we're still, even if we only gave the libraries 2 or 2.5% boost, we're still looking at 8.3 budget increase, 8.3%, because we took away money from our reserve contribution one time to flatten taxation. To do that again, we'd have to drop the contribution to reserve by 40K down to 30. And that would create a pattern that you will never get out of that hole if you needed more money until you being at 10% some year down the road, just pushing that down the road. But we can wait and see what happens with that. And like it or not, that is my instinct right now. We wait and see and go with the closed Fridays. Support in every way we can the library for a funding campaign to build not just extra money for a year or two, but to build something that they can put into an investment account and work from that aspect, because I think the library has changed the mindset with help of input from various people as to how they need to manage their finances in the longer term. But I don't think we're going to find the answers to the comparison between one community and another without doing a whole lot. The other thing I wanted to mention was the threat we faced when provincially the government said, you know, there's employment training, support services, all kinds of stuff like KS supports, and there's other services, Valley Community Services, support to local community. Maybe they'll contract that all out of Kelowna because bigger is better. We almost had all of that yanked from us locally. That would have dug a deep hole for us locally. So we had to think very carefully, well, how do we cobble together and collaborate to be able to hold those services? And we did by collaboration all the way from Nelson right through the East Kootenays to the Rockies. Again, I think with the libraries, we're in a bit of a wait and see. I don't want to see us lose a segment of the services, put more pressure on those other organizations. That's where it's going to go. I'm sure people can't get access to computers. And like at Creston, they're probably going to go to AES and say, hey, we need more services. But we should start that conversation actively, see if there's a different way to do it. But we are not the same as that cluster, Trail, Castlegar, Nelson. If you're in business, you would recognize you're different if you're kind of isolated, Creston. And on the social side of things, we're not in the same situation either. We don't have those 20 minutes away other supports, alternative supports. So I think when next month we look at this, I'm going to say not change taxation, but I'm going to be asking the same question that I will wait for a month as to what is the real number we should be putting in capital reserve, or are we going to bounce the budget by 8.3%, get back to our previous pattern.
I agree with what you're saying. You make good points there. And I also want to reiterate to Sarah that value to our community of the Creston Library is extremely high. What you do is a wonderful service for us, and we want you to keep doing as much of that service as you can. And of course, that puts us in the dilemma of how we can support that. So reaching out for community support is really a great thing, and we hope it's successful. But our question is that sustainable? And I think that's probably your question too. So we will do what we can here as we deliberate, but we really do support what you're doing as well. And I see, Joe, your hand is up, so go ahead, please.
Yeah, through the chair. Just want to note, because actually, you know, the evaluation that Director Vandenberg did is one way, is definitely one way of looking at it. The Kelly, just one of the things that I know that the committee doesn't know is that in 2027, the Castlegar District Public Library at the moment is projecting an 11% increase. That's going to push its contribution from the city of Castlegar and areas I and J to over $600,000. You know, one of the things that gets really difficult, and just to know, this is a good conversation, and and I haven't seen the political feedback yet from Castlegarden area on that potential change. It's not impacting 2026. It looks like it's going to impact 2027. One of the things that definitely I've noticed, Director Vandenberg, and to the committee, is that the way the three library organizations allocated the provincial funding over time was different. So for example, Castlegar spread that out over many years, how they were utilizing that funding, which is pushing this potential increase in local government funding to 2027. That's a significant thing that I've seen, looking at all three. But I really do believe, and Sarah, this maybe is a little bit to you, and I've talked to the Nelson, the executive, the chief librarian at the Nelson Library as well. I really do believe it's time that the libraries as a group present to the district board to try to gain an understanding. Because Kelly, I agree completely. Right now, there is push and pull in multiple services with funding for libraries, and it is a lot around what is this, what is the service level? What are those things that we're funding? How do we put, as a regional district, in almost every one of our library services, every one of our library services is a contribution when the regional district has it on our side. But as Sarah will tell you, the libraries are actually even operating under two different parts of the act, because one's a municipal, or I guess we would call it a local government library, essentially, Sarah, because it could be the same thing here, but is a local government library where some are associations. And the province will no longer allow associations, if I understand that. And I really do believe there's this bigger conversation to understand how this is working. And in particular, it is very clear that it doesn't look like, unless you know something, it does not look like the province is going to be stepping up with anything that's different, which means over time, even at the same service level, that local governments are going to continue to pick up more of those library costs. But I do believe there's a bigger conversation to be had, because I agree, Director Vandenberg, that there is a lot of confusion in the system, not just around this table.
Great, well.
Can I,
Yeah, go ahead, Sarah.
sorry, Joe, can you clarify what the confusion is? Is it just a lack of understanding of the service by the regional district, or can you speak to that a little bit more? Because being sort of exact with how we can better illustrate the value of our service is helpful for us. I know that the library director in Nelson had suggested that our regional district library directors present to the RDCK board all together. So if that's the sort of thing that you mean, because as far as professionally, provincially, libraries are actually really coordinated.
Yeah, through the chair, I think Sarah, in terms of all of our libraries, the Creston Valley Public Library has the most interaction with the political decision makers, stakeholders. I think when Director Vandenberg asks, what is the service level? What Director Jackman just talked about, the service level equals these things. That is pretty clear around this table. That is not clear around the other tables. And so what we get is that whole confusion. What are you comparing? right? Because around that Nelson table, well, there's not even really a Nelson table. There are three, really, the Nelson Library's three separate contributions. Castlegar Public Library's three separate contributions, where those decisions could literally be different by area, by area, by area. And so what Director Vandenberg and Director Jackman are talking the similar language. It's about understanding that service level so that these kind of discussion, when an increase is like, just like what you've done right now, the service level equals, right now, libraries not being open on Friday, right? So like, there's this concept. When we've had this conversation in Nelson, that concept doesn't exist. If, in fact, for those rural directors talking to their library about like their planned contributions, that same common language doesn't exist. And if it doesn't exist across all tables, that's what leads to I think what leads to confusion about how these things are funded. So for example, like, this is actually a very different service than what Castlegar and Nelson EF, or sorry, not EF, get rid of E, FH, do, because they're actually completely, it would be like going director, the town of Creston makes a contribution, area C has its own service, area B has its own service, and area A has its own service. And it could literally be different decisions in the budget based upon that breakdown. So like that's the piece I think the board, all the directors need to hear, like, what are those things that are similar? What are those things that are different? How do the services impact that? You have the most access to the decision makers of any chief librarian.
Thanks, Joe. I don't know if that's good or bad, but thanks.
So through the chair, I believe it's very, very a strength of this table.
Sarah?
Yeah, I think the difference here, Joe, has a lot to do with director and board personalities. This is a human endeavor. Libraries are more a part of the care infrastructure of a community. We do information, but it's also that social connection. So our library directors have very different personalities. And I've had a lot of conversations about RDCK relationship with Nelson and Caslow and Salmo. And I know that we have these meetings for one. A services committee doesn't exist in every area. And so there is a table I can go to. I know that some of my directors are actually so frustrated that they don't have a place to go to have that. And I am a person who, my strength and my focus is relationship with people, right? So I see this as our most important funding relationship. So that's why there's been that extra time. But that is how we are different for sure.
Through the chair, I would not put it down to personal pieces only. I think it is actually knowledge that's actually different. It's that, and what that means, it's not you, because you get this opportunity to speak with the stakeholder directors, have more knowledge on how a regional district works. Those directors have more knowledge about what's actually happening at the library on a regular basis. They have more knowledge about what you hear from the directors about the struggles with taxation and that impact on the community, because that's an impact as well. It's not just about personalities. It is about directors support each other. So directors talk to each other. They have this understanding that gets created. And when there's a break and when there's a difference in how that communication happens, what the communication is, that creates confusion in the system.
A couple more comments and we really have to move on. to the agenda.
No, I appreciate the discussion. Joe, you did bring something forward that kind of caught my interest, and there was a suggestion that a presentation to the board around the subject of libraries could be coordinated at some point in time. In that, it would be really, from my perspective, interesting to see the list of specific services that each of the three entities offers. Because this is the challenge for me is on the social side of things. If I don't participate in a particular program or programs, I don't know the value of it. I don't know how the value of it is to the community either. And we don't have a list of specific services that the budget is trying to support. It would be nice to see that and in comparison to the other libraries in the region. That would be an interest of mine, Joel, to see. I just wanted to add that in. Thank you.
I see Director Watson has her hand up. Go ahead, Amy.
Yeah, thanks. Sarah, I just wanted to note that it'd be great to hear from the collective of libraries at the board if you'd like. We have a pretty limited timeline there, not this level of time, but I put the delegation request form in the chat to you. So if you know of people that want to take the lead on that, that would be great. And it would need to be pretty summarized. We have a max of 20 minutes, including questions at the board table. But it's great. It's a great idea. And there's definitely more than 3 libraries. And their websites, I have gone through them, are quite extensive when it comes to understanding what they're offering to the community. And I know for Caslow and Area D, the amount of residents that use the services for so many different reasons, it's an incredible service for the money they do receive. I just want to say I really appreciate the libraries and what they do and what they face.
Director Jackman.
Yeah, when we're doing our thinking around comparative service and level of service, there's 8 library services, as Joe's pointed out, funded through 8 RDCK services funding libraries, some of them funding, numerous funding the single library, like I&J separately fund Castlegar at separate rates. The 3 highest costs, if you want to look at mill rate or cost per thousand, are in this order: us, then Caslow Area D, and then Nicosia. And if you look at those 3, they are the insular isolated clusters. Caslow and D, and we just heard it from Board Chair Watson, they bring a range of services because it's a bit of a haul, especially this time of year, to get into, say, Nelson, to maybe use a computer, figure something out, or ask a question about this or that. The same with Nicosia. It's a bit of a haul to anywhere from Nicosia. And they accept a higher tax rate. We were lower than both of those until we made our big jump, but we did give a big jump to this service between 2024 and 2025. We were 12.7 cents and we jumped to 14.1 cents. So we are now the most expensive in that assessment, in that, using that viewpoint. All the others that are around bigger centers, Area H, it's the most generous, even though they're not either at, right in Nelson or right in Castlegar, at 11 cents. And I is at 11 cents, but some of the others are 6-7 cents a thousand. But they have a bigger population base, it's different dynamic, and they have a bigger city population. Because town of Creston's population is a fraction of our total ABC. And town is not half the population by any means. So they're different. So if you're gonna do comparisons, I think the comparisons between the Caslow and Area D and the Cusp and Area K, or even the Samo Area G would be more fair comparisons. And then what services do they offer and why? And partly because of distance and just lack of other opportunity to obtain certain services.
Okay, with that, I believe we'll move on to our next agenda item. Thank you again, Sarah. We'll go on to 10.3, yeah. Creston Valley Community Services use of Road Crest Hall.
Can I move the recommendation to start off? Or do you want the staff report first?
I would welcome that and second it.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Director Vandenberg. Discussion?
I'd be happy to hear from staff, but you know, the more I look at this, we struggle to get traveling taps going in on the short, a fraction of the TAPS program, but we're a fraction of the program. It's only worked because we were able to call the support for Valley Community Services. Without that support, a dozen more years ago, we'd have nothing. And most of the province had nothing. So I guess the first point is, this is a service we should not take for granted. It's unique in that it was sustained over time, the drought. No other community was receiving this funding. At this point in time, and then based on the staff report, in theory, we could raise $100,000 a year at a certain rental rate, but we know we won't. The worst possible outcome, we would raise this to the point where TAPS has to retreat to church basements, reduce their level of service, increase their cost of food and any other amenities, which make it a comfortable experience for people who attend those sessions, and possibly only receive a fraction of the potential value of rentals out of that space. So that'd be a real tragedy. The questions in my mind were, do we go year by year, 2 or 3 years, or 5 years? And I'm comfortable with a 5-year, provided that we do a little active pursuit and homework looking forward, because we're not putting anything to manage that capital asset aside. Nothing, not nothing, but it's been refreshed, but it's gonna be a bigger liability 5-10 years from now. I'd like to have us explore through Justine and Valley Community Services over the years. Is there a way to get United Way to pay more money? Do they pay a rental allocation in, say, Prince George or somewhere else in the province? Is there a different formula we could tap into? And that's not something that's going to happen today, because I think there's a couple other things on the work plan. May not happen next year, but I think it's something that seriously has to happen, because we have no dedicated reserve in my mind for that. We are not raising any portion of, not compensating for any portion of the cost of that facility through any revenue stream right now. So I wanted to explore those revenue streams. United Way would be the first hit. That's the one I want to know. Are they paying so much for programming and so much for rents? So to me, that's a longer term exercise. But I can support that we keep this facility fully utilized as it is now for the next 5 years.
Yeah, through the chair to Director Jackman's statement, I think the challenge for staff is, we trust the TAPS. VCS have been in there for a number of years. They brought considerable capital to the facility in 2014, and since then we built up the building on the outside, which they funded about 90% of, and the RDCK put in the finishing touches there. And they've been good tenants, and I think that the financial analysis is, for the $10 a year that this, this minimum fee that we charge versus the $540 a day that they would pay in rental, there's a massive offset there. But to Director Jackman's point, the benefit that program provides to a community, which is, disproportionately seniors than most other communities in British Columbia, never mind the Kootenays, we would say it's got value. And so that subsidy is value. And I think that's why the recommendation is there, is they've been good tenants and we perceive them to provide good value. We haven't done, and we haven't asked for their financials as far as how they're operating the TAPS. We could have that conversation privately and just to do that analysis. But to Director Jackman's point, this is something that And even with this agreement, that does give us, if we do see, and that's in the report, if we do have higher and better needs for use of that facility, or we determine that there's a greater cost to managing that facility in the future through some sort of capital investment required, we could go back to them. I think the agreement states there's a 6-month out for us there. So the 5 years isn't such a risk. It just definitely, puts them in a situation where they're planning for 5 years, and then that disruption to that at any point could be challenging. So.
Dr. Van Bergen.
Thank you. Just a couple of questions, and I think we've kind of touched on it here a little bit. Gary's speaking in terms of reserve allocation, capital, that sort of thing. What are we setting aside for that? My first question is, though, this program is open to any senior within the community, correct?
Yeah, through the chair, I'm actually not sure how TAPS runs, but my perception is that anyone can take part in TAPS.
Okay, because I've heard that there's a maximum amount, and sometimes it's and I don't know if that's true.
Well, through the chair, they're busy and the space is limited. So they're on the lower floor and there's only so many chairs. And then when they move outside on Wednesdays and do their sing along, that pavilion's full. So I probably is a limit.
Right, so that kind of concerned me a little bit. Okay, so in the sense that we're offering the subsidy to a program that's well received and necessary, there's no doubt about it. Got me thinking about, well, we're saving them $544 a day, as per your report says, depending on how you do that. I don't know what programs that they offer specifically. It's not in the report. That would be kind of cool to understand that. Maybe we should just stop in there and have coffee with them one day to find that out. But then there's those operational costs, like there's utilities and lighting and heating and all those things that we're paying for that we don't know what that is. It would be good to understand what the operational cost is. It'd be good to understand an asset projection as to what future capital investment needs to be put into it, because that's all value. And then we got the New Horizon people that are above that. That's a separate entity who take care of that or participate in that program. For example, we have the other senior lodge that hopefully they're taking advantage of those programs. But I did hear that in one instance, the person of the senior was told that no, we're maxed out, we can't take you. And so that concerns me because we are subsidizing that. We need to have an understanding as to what the restrictions may be and why. Perhaps it's not a big enough facility, perhaps whatever. But if we're going to subsidize it, understand what our operational cost is and what our future capital and injections need to be, we need to understand, we need to make sure that it's available to everyone and why not, sort of thing.
And through the chair, the Rotocrest Hall as a standalone, we can do an analysis. We haven't presented that to the committee. It's embedded in the S224 budget, but we could break it out. It is in the works as per the facility condition assessment of this facility and others to do a deeper dive into that one, because we do see certainly with the conversation about what may have transpired with the office renovations, there is some need to assess that facility, whether that happens, which we believe it isn't going to happen. But we can bring that back, because the other part of this in parallel to TAPS is the upstairs of the Rotocrest, which is utilized by New Horizons and other groups. And the New Horizons arrangement, staff met with them briefly in December to talk about their needs as per the conversation that they had back in the fall. And that will trigger an analysis for the committee from staff to show where that subsidy could or may not lie. And that could inform the lower half as well for TAPS.
Supplemental, if I may. And so then the question is, should we offer a 5-year contract? And I wonder, based on doing the needs assessment with that facility and to a large degree our community, maybe the 5-year, if we lock in at a 5-year, we're pretty much locked in. It takes away the flexibility on what we discover through the needs assessment. So that's my only caution on this.
Any other comments? I just want to say too, you're not too young to go to these activities yourself. Just so you know.
I know. So I said, go and have a coffee.
We have this recommendation before us for, as specified. And it was moved and seconded, so I'll just ask for, call the question on the recommendation. Unless we want to reapprove an amendment, do that before.
I would like to make an amendment.
Okay.
And the amendment would be is to reduce that 5 to 3. I don't know that we can do a whole lot within 3 that may change. Yeah, that would be my amendment.
I can second that, if I can speak to it very briefly. It will put a little more pressure on looking for that maybe alternative funding source. Maybe, as I say, there might be a couple of streams through United Way that we haven't pursued. But we want to go any shorter, because the report did tell me go annual renewals. I think that would put the organization in chaos.
Yeah.
You could go 3 years, provided it would be nice to have known what impact that would have on Valley Community Services. And I don't know if there's anything else happening with them in the next few years, but I could support the 3 years.
Okay, so I'll call the question on that then. Okay,
On the amendment.
on the amendment,
To 3. Sure.
okay, we're in favor of the amendment, so we'll consider the amendment passed then. We are in favor of it.
So call the question on the motion as amended.
Okay, call the question on the motion as amended. All in favor? Okay, we have that now. And I understand this too. Certainly, we're not meeting the cost of maintaining this building by leasing it, and so we do need to come up with some figures here, so we know what we need to do, and then I guess who we need to approach to start to add to those figures, because it won't be done exclusively or even partly by TAP, so we have to find funding for that, how much we're gonna need and what's like, so. We move on to the Creston and District Community Complex Concession Agreement.
Yeah, through the chair, apologies, staff had intended to have a report in front of the committee, but the recommendation that staff were making was preempted by some information we received regarding the agreement. So we had intended to, through our processes, request or make a recommendation to award a concession services agreement to an operator. And then we were just working through some insurance complications. So our staff aren't going to make that recommendation today, but what we will do is just prime the committee for next month. And so we make that conversation a little bit more straightforward. But the concession at the Creston District Community Complex includes a fully outfitted commercial kitchen with storage, a small office space, cooler, and other appliances. And during the pre-pandemic, and we had an operator that had been in there for several years through a commercial arrangement where they had submitted revenue sharing to us in lieu of rent, and it was set at 10%. And the challenges that presented staff were, trusting that the monthly statements they provided and were accurate, and so that was a bit of a challenge. But they left during the pandemic through complications of that arrangement. Since then, since 2022, we have been unable to procure the services of an operator. And we have many times put out requests for proposals, publicly posted for any entrepreneur or operation or society to come in and run the concession to deliver food services in the complex, to make good benefit of the asset that we have. And food services in a multiplex like this are almost ubiquitous and are part of the service delivery, but we have been struggling to get someone to deliver that services. So what we've had since 2022 is groups or operators that have come in and rented the concession on an hourly or monthly basis to provide food services for special events, hockey games, or whatever, bonspiels, etc. That is not a consistent service delivery. And so we have attempted to get somebody in there on a more permanent basis that will provide ideally consistent schedule of food services that we can rely on, and also just, generally good representation of our operation. So where we're at is we had a concession operator for a year. We had intended to renew that agreement. They had since late in the summer, they have since walked away from that. So we put out a request for proposal, received none, no requests, no proposal, sorry, for the operating the concession. So then staff reached out to try and find somebody. We had somebody, we had negotiated with, and again, the problem that we're having is also that the fee right now, the rent that the market is sort of providing is very minimal. It's $500 a month, which we don't know if that even covers our cost for power and gas. And as a comparison, in Castlegar, we have consistently, rented that concession for between $1,300 and $1,500 a month. So it's a bit of a challenge for us, given that we think 500 is a very low number, but that's where most of the operators have come in to give it a try. And so we had somebody that had a group that had come in, and we were almost ready to sign an agreement, and then they walked away, and then we went and found another contractor. So we've got them on a short-term facility use agreement. But the challenge for us is that there's a new administrative template for concession agreements that mitigates the RDCK's risk for these types of arrangements. It's called a concession services agreement. And regardless of the length, we have to come to the committee and the board for that approval. So that's what staff will do in February. If we believe that concession operator has, we're satisfied with the service they're providing, and they're a good fit for the operation, we'll make that recommendation to the committee. In the meantime, we'll just keep them on a short-term rental agreement. But we do intend to put out another request for proposal to again look for, and maybe we'll promote this differently and reach out to the chamber for support. But we do intend to have somebody that can provide a better level of service in that concession on a consistent basis.
Yeah, some years ago when we first opened that concession, we had idealistic menu constraints where we thought it's not just going to be hot dogs and what do you call it, chopped Creston, whatever, munched together, deep fried chicken fingers or baked or whatever. We were going to have some restrictions on what was offered in the menu. Is that still there?
Yeah, through the chair, our request for proposals since my time at this complex has included mandating healthy options. And so when we evaluate proposals, their menu is submitted as well as their pricing, but also healthy choices have to be a percentage or a portion of their menu offerings for the community.
And so the question, not the answer today, maybe is that too restricted? Is that part of the problem?
Yeah, through the chair, it hasn't been to date. And I think that most concession operators know that they can throw a salad or a vegetable plate or something that is, let's say, gluten-free or grease-free or fat-free or sugar-free in the menu to meet that need. So it hasn't been that challenging.
So my questions are around the advertising. How do you typically get that word out to the community? I'm quite surprised that the community hasn't shown a higher interest in terms of numbers. They may not qualify, but certainly it's an opportunity.
Yeah, through the chair, we tried a different number of approaches, and certainly through the black press, through the print media, through Facebook. We also have our RDCK website when we put these out, and then we'll even if somebody comes to us in the meantime and says, "Hey, I'm interested in running your concession," we'll say the RFP is going out, and then we contact them directly and say this is out there. And in the past, we have received a handful of proposals that indicate that the operator isn't as sophisticated or wouldn't be able to deliver the service that we're looking for. So some of those haven't quite, been evaluated to the minimum level. But the promotion of this, I think, could be, we could increase the promotion of this offering for the community. And like I said, talk to the chamber and other business and commercial partners and, see who's potentially looking at this as an opportunity. It is something where I have seen in complexes like this where even a branded or franchised outfit has taken these on.
And then supplemental, is there, Director Jackman talked about some restrictions, the menu type of thing. Is this contract seasonal and is it hourly restricted? So does it operate throughout the 4 seasons? Or is it just expected to do during your winter months, which is typically your bigger months or busier months? And on a daily rate, is there an hourly restriction as to when they're open? Do they support the tier hockey?
Yeah, through the chair, there's a minimum that we set for the service delivery, and we do expect the hockey games, tournaments, potentially bonspiels, And any other special event, we expect, you know, we say we do want that as a minimum, but we usually leave it up to the proponent to tell us what their suggested schedule is, and that actually plays into the evaluation, where if they say they're gonna be open more hours or more consistently, that gets them a higher score. We'd prefer to have somebody that's in there on a more regular, consistent basis than to say to them, you have to be here from 3 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Friday and all day weekends. We say, tell us what you think is gonna benefit us and you.
Okay, forward to February.
Yep, we'll hear more in February then. Thanks, Craig. So the last item on this meeting is the action item list. Any questions or comments on it? Go ahead.
The item 2, I thought it used to say we'd be seeing that in January, I guess we're seeing that in February. When we see it in February, it's like that, you know, it's the dangerous dog issue. Hopefully we're pushing this so far down the road towards a civic election. What our options are, if it can be done by alternative process, a little detail on that, how big will timeframe to that is, if it's worth trying to do. Or is it a total write-off this budget year? To me, like it's total write-off, but I would hope in February we would know if it's at all possible to do anything with this, or if it's another year. So I can communicate to people who write emails and ask, are we ever gonna do this?
Okay, anything else?
There's a couple of items that Robin has indicated from our last meeting that's ready to go off. That appears to be correct. I guess I wonder about our conversation around the traditional use study. I mean, this started in September of 2023. I wonder how this is changing in terms of our council to council endeavor with the water sustainability plan. I don't know if those things can be linked together. I don't know if they ought to be separate. I mean, it's disconcerting that we just simply, and I don't want to say being ignored, but that's what it feels like. We're being ignored to have a conversation around the traditional use study. And so I would look to my partners to, should we continue to have this on our action list? Is this ever going to come to fruition? Is it? What are your guys' thoughts?
My hope is we can link it into our C2C meeting, because it is an important discussion that we still need to have. Hoping that we can include that. Our C2C meeting, I think once they're arranged. I don't assume there'll be short meetings, so hopefully we'll have enough time to put this in. That would be my request to our staff, is that when we arrange the C2C, make sure that there is enough time to have this discussion as part of it. It is, the additional use is actually part of overall water stewardship as well, so I don't see how we couldn't link them together.
Yeah, and I printed this as part of my homework exercise, and I thought I might have a chance to bring it up in individually in casual conversation, but I think there is some homework. Traditional use through one lens is everywhere. You could say somebody walked here and there and held a ceremony. What comes to mind is Todd Mountain or Sun Peaks, where there was a challenge. It wasn't supported by Kamloops, as I understand, to take that community and say, hey, this is your traditional use area with the strength of claim, because the people that went for that title land had a very significant presence at some time. So traditional use is everywhere. And then over the last 100 and some years, use by people writ large, everybody is everywhere. And Director DeBoon being an example, there's probably, draw a pretty wide map, not quite as wide as this, where you walk yourself with purpose, for the purpose of governance, actually. Enforcing laws of the land and or orderly conduct, whatever, with a purpose for government. The reason I printed this is, and there's hundreds and hundreds of little dots here. These are areas of interest. And I started my homework thing, because we weren't getting much else, to try and sort out, well, what do we know about the area of interest? Because we've had a board discussion on this, touched on this, there's archaeological overview assessments in many, many locations. And some of them may have revealed enough to have done the next step, the more thorough, not a paper exercise, but the investigation, which maybe that's a dot on the map. And so things like Martel, because in my mind, people call Sanka at different places. Is it Sanka Creek? Is it south? Seems to be maybe some historical misunderstanding of exactly when you use a name or a word, exactly where is that? Was that used here or there? And was it really investigated? How does that apply to any other locations of interest to the regional district, say for parks? So there's some homework to be done that I think I don't want to till May or June. I would like to understand the difference between a general statement that there has been traditional use versus where the more critical areas of interest are, that are things that'd be great to explain to everybody why we are either partnering in something or staying away or pushing forward. Like to have that understanding of these dots on the map, these hundreds of dots, of them, many, many of them, plus the Creston area, which is not surprising, all the way up the shore. That's what I'd like to hear. The differences, not the generality of it. I don't think any of us are lacking in education in the generality of the understanding of our history, especially colonial history. I'd like to know a little more about the specifics. And before me.
Who are you requesting that to staff or to?
The standing request should do it. I would hope before we had a workshop and a discussion, be an outline, and then from the outline, it would say, well, yeah, and maybe I would forward this and say, I want to understand why is something a dot and something not. But we haven't even seen an outline of how we would begin something other than a general conversation, which is all we've had, general conversation.
So again, how do you suggest we bring this forward then?
I think I'm told from time to time to trust staff and let them take the lead on what the meat of a topic is. That's what I'm kind of waiting for. You've heard, I just skipped over dog bylaw and said before I could write that bylaw in an hour or two. In my mind, what it needs to be, and that's inappropriate. I think that staff, we're having ongoing conversation with all the nations within overlapping the RDCK at some level, should be able to come forward with an outline of what we've heard so far and what additional detail we could have. Because traditional use is everywhere. Specific use, maybe we've used the wrong word because of traditional, but that's the document we were given, traditional use. And it's got, circles that overlap that mean different things, whether there was hunting, gathering, community, permanent, temporary, seasonal. You've never done the drill down as to where those circles and activities result in a dot that would guide us in spending taxpayers' money more effectively, where we should focus and where we should partner, where we should step back.
Did you want to frame that into staff direction or?
No, staff is listening.
Already there.
I don't have any modification to the ask. I just would like staff to come with their first thought and outline of what more we can learn and build on that.
Joe, before we go to you, let's go to Roger here.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. For all the reasons Gary's mentioning, we don't know if this exercise we're entering into will satisfy us as far as that opportunity. And so I would like it left on the list until after we've gone through this exercise. We might be gaining a lot of knowledge doing that, going through that exercise. But yeah, it should have happened. It's 2.5 years now. We should have had the opportunity. So yeah, it should stay on the list.
Go ahead, Joe.
Through the chair, I'll just remind everyone that we did have the meeting with Chad Luke. We spent a day, and the intent was that was the opportunity to speak to him about that. But you should have received, I understand, an email from Jenna this week asking for what do you want as the topics for a workshop so that we can really nail down what it is that we want to go through. So staff is working on it amongst many other things, and we just wanted to get that piece really clear in our minds about what those questions are. The other thing to note is that there's other workshops being planned on coming from the district that hopefully will help answer some of those questions as well. Just, to know that there should not be an impression around this table that we are not negotiating with or we are very cautious in any of our communications with Yakanuki or Tanaha in this area in particular. Some of this, the consternation, I don't know that we as staff can solve it. I think I heard Director Vandenberg talk about, there somehow has to be this political coming together with the Yakanuki and Tanaha so that that conversation can take place from government to government. I think it's really difficult place for staff to be in to try and be this interpreter of political discussion. Jenna put out that survey about topics for a workshop, and then we would try and gather hopefully people that can help create that conversation to get to a better place.
I appreciate that, Joe. And I'm just trying to, that what she asked for, is that specifically for us locally, or was that RDCK broad?
Through the chair, no, that's this committee.
Thank you for that reminder. I will touch on, you talked about validation and understanding. The problem, or not the problem, the opportunity is to validate and understand that report. That allows us to, in preparation, for example, I've gone back to the early 1800s and created a complete timeline of events to current day as preparation for understanding how that traditional use study fits into any of our future conversations. That's my preparation for it. The other thing I'll remind you of is that traditional use study is being referenced in staff reporting. Throughout, sprinkled whenever it's appropriate, the TUS is referred to and that sort of thing, which I feel is a little unfair because we have not really had that validation opportunity. And the understanding of that is, to me, it's saying, well, we don't really need to have a conversation. This is what it is, and we'll use it as a resource in other and further reports. That's how it's come across to me. I may be exaggerating a little bit on it, but I have seen reference to TUS on a number of fronts, and yet we still haven't had that validation, that understanding conversation, which apparently, and it really resonates with our group. We're keenly interested in having that understanding, having that discussion.
Go ahead, Joe.
Understood. Again, I don't know if that is more of not you, and sorry, Kel, I didn't mean that. What I meant is as a committee or through the district, the traditional use study has not stopped anything that we have done in parks. In fact, it has accelerated what we are able to do in parks. We would not have got the funding from CBT for the park acquisition we just did without that. That work equal, I can't remember, right now what that amount was, over $500,000 of granting. The work is not a barrier. It's been a door opener. It was a door opener at Creston Valley Beach when it came to something as simple as putting in a trail. It was a door opener for this purchase. It was a door opener. I think what's always been uncomfortable for us in ComServe, and I know Mark's not here today, but even for Mark, is that it feels like there's a conversation that is not something that we can facilitate. That's required. Sorry, and we're not an expert in this field to be able to say how that can happen. You know, I know that there's a number of different things coming, whether it be the EDMA consultations that are coming up. I know that I've heard Mike and Arnold, I've heard a number of times of a council to count, like a process with the town of Creston that the directors can be involved in. But what the attempt was with that survey was just to try to figure out how we do this, but not impact all of those other conversations that are going on as well.
See, Director Watson, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, thanks. I just wanted to provide some of the historical context, not the Indigenous historical timeline that Kelly referenced, but the TUS, the traditional use study, was initiated, I believe it was 2 terms ago, and it was specific to try and identify and understand park acquisition, which has been a high priority for this area for quite some time. What I'm hearing is this, and it makes sense, but they're siloed conversations, is that now that we're doing watershed governance, which is a newer initiative than what the TUS was initiated for, directors are trying to connect the two. Joe is not in the watershed governance conversation. And so the C2C that Kelly's referencing, that he's connecting to the traditional use study, is by default actually a separate initiative initially. I don't know if that makes sense. But I just wanted to highlight, like, the traditional use study is not, it was done by Yakanuki because it is, and Tanaka, because it's based on their traditional use. It's not our traditional use, but it was to directly inform park acquisition and to really understand best use of land in that context. It was one of the very first things that, when we consider reconciliation and understanding land use, that was one of the first items that really came forward. That was a really good document to identify that. And as Joe said, it informed the park acquisition process. It has not been directly linked to the Watershed Governance Initiative, which is separate. That being said, it's an important conversation to understand, but I would not say that we have to approve the TUS. It is not information that is ours to say yes or no to. It's to inform our decisions, being cognizant of past use of land and what those traditional uses were. I believe and have seen it historically that we've had several conversations, such as the walkabout with Chad Luke, which I couldn't make, where they're not siloing the conversation between them. And I don't think that we need to, but I do want to just acknowledge that staff, this was about parks. That's what the TUS was about. The Watershed Governance C2C is about watershed governance. When we get to those tables, it's really good to understand the traditional use because it directly informs water use. So just more of a historical thing. It was more than a term ago, so I can understand when it came through that Kelly and others may not have been at the table at that time. And it did assist in park acquisition. That was its primary purpose.
I agree with what Joe said, that it has been a door opener, with one exception, and that's Martel Beach. It actually has not been a door opener there. And I think at some point we need to have a focused discussion with the Yakanuki on the future of Martel Beach, because the use has not changed or dropped at all. It's still heavily used by the public, but it's not managed well for public use. And so I think it's a constant concern. Because of that, we would like to see it managed better for public use, because you cannot exclude public there the way the road is set up. And it is a popular spot. So, you know, there are things that we need to maybe separate out from this conversation and just address them specifically. And I think that's kind of what's holding us back, is having those type of conversations to kind of bring some resolution to spots that we are not advancing on. And then, like you say, Joe, we are advancing on a lot of them, but there are some that we're not. So over time, we need to address those, I believe. Anything else? Okay, we will move on then to, we'll open the gallery to public. If you have any questions, now is your time.
First of all, my group has asked me to read this, so, firstly, I would really like to thank all the directors that are here. This is a tough job. I don't think I've been to a meeting in the community that I haven't seen Mr. Vandenberg there. Mr. Turney's been out lots to all the meetings. Thank you very much. I know you guys are making somewhere between $3 and $5 an hour, so. Okay, secondly, we acknowledge the Second Nations people, those ancestors who settled in North America prior to 1900. We recognize their historic presence, contribution, and enduring connection to the land, including unceded leasehold improvements and hereditary interest in the British Columbia lands. We acknowledge that these lands continue to be shaped and shared by the histories and responsibilities of the First and Second Nations. So, having said that, I am a former forensic accountant and worked in public practice as well. I've done audits on governments and school boards and whatever through the past, just to give you a little background on me. I know time is short here, and so I wanted to talk a little bit about the library issue. I've looked at a couple of comparisons along with obviously you folks have as well. And Mr. Vandenberg had compared Castlegar to Creston. And as I think that's a valid, very valid comparison. The issue here is that the Castlegar facility seems to be giving the public a library service, where the Creston facility seems to be some sort of a, not necessarily just a library. They're doing things, they're actually taking revenue away from some of our local businesses. They have a heat camera. They have a monitor to check for gas. We're taxing plumbers to come and do those services, and then we're competing with them by providing free services through a library of all things, which if anything, I would say that should be done through our building inspector division.
So before you go on, I just want to guide you that we're open for questions.
Okay, so then
it's a question that
then this will be my single and only question.
Okay.
Is this board really concerned with public input? Because I have a lot of input, and if I can't do it here. If you are concerned with public input, then I am all ears. I'm prepared to provide whatever information and time I can for free. Reach out to me. I can run all the numbers for you. But unless we can speak and have real input, there's just no point in actually got no spending a day here. So if you are interested in input, get a hold of me. If not, I guess thank you for your time.
Don't forget, you're not the only public input. We were inundated with letters.
Pardon me?
I said, you were not the only public input. We have been inundated with letters and emails in support of what the library does. So
Fair enough. Fair enough. Yeah.
we have to walk that line between
The
all
thing
the
is,
effort that we have.
honestly, Mr. DeBoon, the budget that these people are putting forward, the province of BC says that people in BC can afford a 2.6% increase. And I know that by way of the rental board says you cannot increase your rent more than 2.6%. Meanwhile, every year we get an 8 or 9 or 10 or 12 or 20% asked by the library board now. Then you come back to me and say, oh, well, the library has to do functions that aren't functions of the library, like help our homeless community. Well, why do we have a homeless community? I'll tell you why, because we don't have any low-income housing. If I'm going to rent a property I can put my rent up 2.6% a month, and then you come along and put my taxes up 10% a month. Why would I invest in low-income housing when there's no formula for success as an investor? So your response then will be to increase taxation so we can supply funding to low-income housing, and in the interim, house these people in a warming room in our library. Meanwhile, half the public of this town refuses to go to the library because A, it has the SOGI program in there. We're enticing children to come to the library with puzzles and games, makey things. All these programs that get kids into the library and then expose them to the SOGI program. So is this really a library, or is this some sort of social experiment that a little group of people have that they want to, get people into their path? It's a real concern here, and there are people that homeschool particularly that would love to use the library, but they have to walk past some homeless people to get inside, and then they have to monitor their children so they can't see the pornographic section of the library. And the library is acting as, as a plumbing, like a plumbing shop. Okay, and very good.
Good point.
I made my point. Thank you. I'm going to thank you for your time. Anybody who would like to reach out for me, I have all the numbers that says, that you can use for your consideration. I hope you do. And for the record, if you want to write my number down, 780 712 5816. Reach out. I'll provide time to any of you that want to talk. Thank you.
Any other question? We'll take a 5-minute recess and then we convene and close. If there's a formality